In the heart of Wyoming's high desert, where freight trains thunder through the night, carrying everything except hope, a man who'd spent 15 years running from his past was about to collide with 6 futures that desperately needed saving. It started with a sound that didn't belong, the cry of a child echoing across an abandoned platform at 2 a.m., and ended with a question that would unravel everything Cole Brennan thought he knew about family, duty, and the difference between surviving and actually living. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind cut across the Rockridge train depot like a blade, carrying with it the smell of diesel and sagebrush. Cole Brennan stood on the loading platform of his freight warehouse, checking inventory numbers that never seemed to balance. The business, Brennan Logistics, was barely keeping its head above water, but it was his, built from nothing after he'd walked away from everything else. Rockridge, Wyoming wasn't much of a town anymore. Population 843 and dropping every year. The railroad still came through twice daily, but it rarely stopped. Most of the old depot buildings had been abandoned for decades, their windows boarded up, their purposes forgotten. Cole's warehouse sat adjacent to the tracks, one of the last operating businesses in what used to be a thriving freight hub. He'd chosen this place deliberately, remote, forgotten, the kind of nowhere that asked no questions about where you came from or why you wanted to disappear. For 15 years, it had been exactly what he needed, a place to work himself into exhaustion and avoid thinking about Chicago, about the fire, about the choices that still woke him up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat. The 1147 freight was running late. Cole could tell by the absence of vibration through the platform boards, a rhythm he'd learned to read like a language. He finished his count, locked the warehouse, and was heading toward his truck when he heard it, a cough, sharp and wet, the kind that spoke of chest colds and insufficient shelter. He stopped, keys in hand, listening. The wind played tricks out here, carried sounds from miles away, made you hear things that weren't there. But then it came again, followed by a whimper that was unmistakably human and unmistakably young. Cole turned toward the old depot building, its silhouette dark against the star-scattered sky. The main structure had been condemned 5 years ago, but the fence around it was a joke, rusted chain link with gaps a child could slip through. He'd seen evidence of transients before, discarded food wrappers, makeshift camps, the detritus of people passing through with nowhere to go. But children? Out here? His boots crunched across gravel as he approached. The depot's covered platform extended along the tracks, supported by iron pillars that had been painted green sometime in the 1950s. Most of the paint had flaked away, leaving rust patterns that looked like dried blood in the moonlight. "Hello?" His voice echoed off the empty building. "Someone there?" Silence. Then a shuffling sound, like something or someone trying to move deeper into shadow. Cole pulled out his phone, activating the flashlight. The beam cut through darkness, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and scattered debris. He moved slowly, deliberately keeping his footsteps audible. Surprising frightened people in the dark was a good way to get hurt, and he had the sense that whoever was hiding here was very, very frightened. The beam caught movement at the far end of the platform, behind an old ticket booth that had lost its glass decades ago. He could see shapes now, small forms huddled together in a space barely large enough for one adult. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, stopping about 15 feet away. "My name's Cole. I run the warehouse next door." A face emerged from the shadows. A boy, maybe 13 or 14, with dark hair that hung in his eyes and a jawline that suggested he was trying very hard to be brave. He positioned himself in front of the others, a human shield, and his hands were clenched into fists, despite the obvious tremor running through them. "We're leaving," the boy said, his voice cracking with cold or fear or both. "We're not causing trouble. We'll be gone by morning." "It's 2 a.m., Cole replied. "Where exactly are you planning to go?" The boy's jaw tightened, but he had no answer. Behind him, Cole could now see the others, 5 more boys, ranging in age from what looked like teenagers down to a child who couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. They were pressed together for warmth, their clothes inadequate for Wyoming's high desert nights, their faces pale in the flashlight's beam. 6 boys, 6 children huddled on an abandoned train platform in the middle of nowhere with temperatures dropping toward freezing. Every instinct Cole had developed over 15 years of deliberate isolation screamed at him to walk away. Call someone official. Make it someone else's problem. He'd built his life around not being involved, not being responsible for anyone but himself. Getting tangled up with homeless kids meant authorities, questions, complications he'd spent years avoiding, but he couldn't unhear that cough, couldn't unsee the smallest boy's lips, which had a bluish tint even in the poor light. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. The older boy's eyes flickered with calculation, weighing truth against whatever story might get them out of this situation with the least trouble. "Just tonight," he said finally. "We're waiting for someone." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The makeshift camp behind the ticket booth showed signs of at least 2 or 3 days' occupation. There were food wrappers, empty all of them, and a backpack that looked like it had been through a war. Water bottles arranged to catch condensation. Cardboard laid out as insulation against the concrete. These kids hadn't just stopped here for a night. They'd been surviving here, and barely. "Your parents know where you are." The boy's expression hardened. "We don't have parents." 4 words, delivered with the flat finality of someone stating an immutable fact. Cole felt something twist in his chest. An old pain he'd thought he'd successfully buried. "What's your name?" he asked, a pause. "Then Ethan." "Ethan what?" "Just Ethan. Fair enough." Cole understood about not wanting to give away too much. "The others?" Ethan glanced back at his brothers. Cole could see now that they had to be siblings. They shared the same dark hair, the same angular features, the same wary expression. "That's Marcus, Liam, Owen, Caleb, and—" He hesitated before finishing. "And that's Noah. He's 5. The smallest one, Noah, was shivering violently despite being wrapped in what looked like a sleeping bag that had lost most of its insulation. As Cole watched, he coughed again, that wet, rattling sound that spoke of lungs struggling with cold and probably infection. "Noah needs to see a doctor," Cole said. "We're fine," Ethan replied automatically. "We don't need anything." "Kid, your brother sounds like he's developing pneumonia." "That's not fine." "I said we're fine." Ethan's voice rose, desperation bleeding through the attempted authority. "We don't need help. We don't need—" He stopped, his composure cracking. "We're not going back. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning to call, we're not going back." The words hung in the freezing air, loaded with implication. Not going back. Which meant they'd come from somewhere bad enough that sleeping on an abandoned train platform in near-freezing temperatures seemed like the better option. Cole had been in law enforcement once, before Chicago, before everything went wrong. He recognized the signs, the defensive posturing, the fierce protectiveness, the way the older boys had positioned themselves between him and the younger ones. These weren't runaways looking for adventure. These were kids running from something. He should call social services, should contact the county sheriff, should do everything by the book and let the system handle it. But Cole Brennan had stopped trusting systems 15 years ago. "I've got a space heater in the warehouse," he heard himself say. "And coffee. Hot chocolate for the little ones. You can warm up, get some food in you, and then we'll figure out what's next. No calls, no authorities. Not tonight, anyway." Ethan studied him with eyes that were far too old for his face. "Why?" "Because your brother needs to get warm before that cough turns into something worse. And because—" Cole paused, surprised by his own honesty. "Because I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and the distant sound of wind through the depot's broken windows. Finally, Ethan nodded once, a sharp economical movement that suggested he'd made similar calculations before, weighing risks against necessities and choosing the least bad option. "Just for tonight," he said firmly. "Just until Noah warms up. Just for tonight," Cole agreed. Knowing even as he said it that he was lying to them both, the boys emerged slowly from their hiding spot, gathering their meager belongings with the efficiency of people who'd packed up and moved many times before. Marcus and Liam, who looked to be about 11 and 9, carried the backpack between them. Owen and Caleb, maybe 7 and 6, stayed close to Ethan, and Noah, the smallest, moved with the slow, careful steps of someone whose body was running on empty. Cole led them across the gravel lot to his warehouse, unlocking the side door and ushering them into the small office space he'd converted into something approximating living quarters. It wasn't much. A cot, a desk, a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge, but it was warm and dry and safe. The boys stood just inside the doorway, uncertain and watchful, as if they expected this unexpected kindness to transform into a trap. Cole grabbed the space heater from the corner, plugged it in, and set it to high. Then he filled an electric kettle with water and pulled down the ancient jar of instant hot chocolate he kept, for the rare occasions when clients brought their kids to the warehouse. Bathrooms through that door, he said, pointing. Towels in the cabinet if anyone wants to clean up. I'll make food. He busied himself with the kitchenette, giving them space to process this change in circumstances. From the corner of his eye, he watched as they slowly relaxed, drawn toward the heater like moths to flame. Noah ended up closest to it, still wrapped in his inadequate sleeping bag, his small body shaking with cold that had settled deep into his bones. The water boiled. Cole made 6 cups of hot chocolate, heavy on the powder and sugar, and set them on the desk. Then he opened the mini-fridge and assessed his options. He'd never been much of a cook, but he had eggs, bread, cheese, some lunch meat that was probably still good. He could make sandwiches, scrambled eggs, something with calories and protein. As he worked, the boys began to thaw, literally and figuratively. Marcus and Liam wrapped their hands around the hot chocolate mugs, inhaling the steam. Owen and Caleb whispered to each other, glancing around the office with the wide-eyed wonder of children who'd forgotten what safety felt like. Even Ethan's rigid posture softened slightly as warmth began seeping into the room. Only Noah remained silent and still, his breathing audible and labored. Cole assembled sandwiches, scrambled eggs in a pan on the hot plate, and set everything out on paper plates. "Eat," he said simply. The boys descended on the food with a hunger that went beyond missing one meal. This was the hunger of days, maybe weeks, of insufficient nutrition. They ate quickly, efficiently, with the focus of people who knew food was never guaranteed and should never be wasted. Cole watched Noah particularly. The boy picked at his sandwich, managing only a few bites before his coughing fit returned, worse this time. His small body shook with the force of it, and when it finally subsided, he leaned against Ethan with the exhausted weakness of someone whose resources were completely depleted. "He needs antibiotics," Cole said quietly. "Probably chest x-rays to make sure it's not worse than bronchitis." "We can't," Ethan replied, his voice equally quiet but firm. "Can't go to a hospital. They'll ask questions. They'll call—" He stopped. "They'll call who?" Cole pressed. "Who are you running from?" Ethan's jaw clenched, that same defensive wall slamming back into place. "Nobody. We're just traveling." "Traveling where? To what? Does it matter?" Ethan's eyes met his, challenging. "You said no authorities tonight. You said we could warm up and then figure it out. So we're warming up. We'll be gone by morning, and you can go back to whatever it is you do here by yourself." The words were meant to establish distance, to remind Cole that this was temporary, transactional, nothing more. But they landed differently than intended, because Cole recognized himself in them. The same walls, the same refusal to need anyone, the same conviction that isolation was safer than connection. He'd been building those walls for 15 years. And in one night, 6 cold, hungry, desperate boys had somehow found a crack in the foundation. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "The cot's mine, but there's floor space. I've got extra blankets in the storage room. Tomorrow, we'll figure out next steps. But that kid needs medicine. And I'm not letting him get worse because you're too stubborn to accept help. We don't need— Yeah, I heard you the first time. You don't need anything. Cole's voice was harder now, but not unkind. Here's the thing, though. That's not actually true. You need food, shelter, medical care, and probably about 100 other things you've been doing without for too long. So you can keep pretending you're fine, or you can accept that sometimes people need help, and that's not weakness. That's just being human. The speech surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise Ethan. Cole Brennan didn't do speeches, didn't get involved, didn't lecture homeless kids about accepting help when he'd spent 15 years refusing to accept any himself. But something about these 6 boys, about Noah's labored breathing and Ethan's 2 old eyes and the way they'd all huddled together for warmth on an abandoned platform, had gotten under his skin, had cracked something open that he'd thought was permanently sealed. Ethan stared at him, emotions flickering across his young face too quickly to name. Finally, he nodded once. Just tonight. And if you call anyone, if you try to turn us into anyone, we'll run, and you won't find us again. Understood, Cole said. Now let's get these kids bedded down before they fall asleep where they're sitting. He retrieved blankets and pillows from the storage room, creating makeshift beds on the floor. The boys arranged themselves with practiced efficiency, the older ones positioning themselves protectively around the younger. It was a formation they'd clearly used before, a defensive arrangement that spoke of threats Cole could only guess at. Noah ended up between Ethan and Marcus, both older boys keeping him close as his coughing gradually subsided into labored breathing. Cole watched the careful way they tucked blankets around him, the gentle way they checked his forehead for fever, and felt that crack in his foundation widen a little more. These weren't just random kids who'd ended up on the same train platform. This was a family, fractured and struggling, but unmistakably bound together by something stronger than circumstance. As the boys finally settled into exhausted sleep, Cole sat at his desk, watching them in the dim glow of the space heater. 6 brothers, no parents, running from something bad enough to risk freezing to death rather than go back. The smart thing would be to call social services in the morning. Let professionals handle it. Go back to his isolated, uncomplicated existence. But as he watched Noah's small chest rise and fall with each difficult breath, as he saw the way Ethan's hand rested protectively on his youngest brother's shoulder, even in sleep, Cole knew he wasn't going to do the smart thing. He'd spent 15 years running from responsibility, from connection, from anything that might require him to be more than just a man moving boxes from one place to another. Maybe it was time to stop running. The wind howled outside, rattling the warehouse's metal walls. On the floor, 6 boys slept the deep, exhausted sleep of people who'd been holding fear at bay for too long. And at his desk, Cole Brennan stared at his phone, knowing he should make a call but finding himself unable to dial. Tomorrow would bring complications. Questions he didn't want to answer. Decisions that would change everything. But tonight, 6 children who had nowhere else to go were warm, fed and safe, and somehow, impossibly, that mattered more than all his carefully constructed walls. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dawn came reluctantly to Rockridge, the sun struggling to break through a layer of clouds that promised snow. Cole hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his desk chair, alternating between checking on Noah's breathing and staring at his phone. The contact for county social services glowing on the screen like an accusation. The right thing was clear. These boys needed professional help, medical care, proper shelter, legal guardianship. Whatever they were running from, the system existed to protect children in exactly this situation. He should have called hours ago, but every time his finger hovered over the dial button, he remembered the fear in Ethan's eyes. We're not going back. The absolute conviction in those words, the certainty that whatever came next in the system was worse than freezing on a train platform. Cole knew something about systems that failed the people they were supposed to protect. He'd been part of one once, before everything collapsed. Noah stirred around 6 a.m., his cough returning with a vengeance. The sound woke the others, who instantly went on alert, hands reaching for younger brothers, bodies tensing for flight or fight. It was a response so ingrained it was clearly automatic, and it told Cole more about their recent past than any explanation could. "Easy," he said quietly from his chair. "You're still in the warehouse." "Still safe." Ethan sat up, his eyes immediately finding Cole, then scanning the room to account for all his brothers. When he was satisfied everyone was present, some of the tension left his shoulders, but not all of it. "What time is it?" "A little after 6. How's Noah?" As if in answer, the smallest boy coughed again, curling into himself with the effort. Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's fine. He's not fine, and we both know it." Cole stood, stretching muscles that had stiffened from a night in the chair. "That cough's worse than last night. He needs antibiotics at minimum, probably an inhaler if it's gotten into his lungs. I told you, we can't go to a hospital." "I heard you." Cole moved to the kitchenette, starting the coffee maker and pulling out what remained of his breakfast supplies. "But there's a clinic in Millerton about 20 miles east. Doc Carson runs it. He's not big on paperwork, and he doesn't ask questions he doesn't need answers to." Ethan's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you know about a doctor who doesn't ask questions?" "Fair point." Cole poured water into the coffee maker, considering how much to reveal. "I've lived here 15 years. You learn things about who's trustworthy and who isn't. Doc Carson's good people. Fixed up a few ranch hands who didn't have insurance, treated some folks who had reasons for avoiding official channels. He'll help Noah. In exchange for what?" The cynicism in a 13-year-old's voice was jarring, but Cole understood it. These boys had learned that nothing came free, that kindness always had a price tag. "In exchange for payment," Cole said simply. "Which I'll cover. No strings attached. We don't take charity." "It's not charity. It's—" Cole paused, searching for words that would make sense to someone too young to understand complicated motivations. "It's just what you do when a kid's sick and needs help. You help." The other boys were waking fully now, sitting up and watching the exchange with varying degrees of wariness. Marcus and Liam looked hopeful, as if they wanted to believe this stranger might actually help without wanting something in return. Owen and Caleb clung to each other, still too frightened to trust. And Noah just looked exhausted, his small face pale and drawn. "After the doctor," Ethan said carefully, "then what? You call whoever you're supposed to call, and we get split up into different foster homes. Or sent back to—" He stopped abruptly. "Sent back where?" Cole pressed. "Where were you before you ended up on that platform?" Ethan's mouth clamped shut, and Cole saw the same wall go up that had appeared last night. These boys had secrets, the kind that kept them sleeping on frozen concrete rather than seeking help from adults who were supposed to protect them. Cole made a decision. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to get Noah medical care. Then we're coming back here, and you're going to tell me the whole story. Not because I'm going to force you, but because if you want my help and you need help, whether you admit it or not, I need to know what we're dealing with. And then you'll call social services," Ethan said flatly. "Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what you tell me." Cole pulled out eggs and bread, his hands busy while his mind raced through implications. "I'm not saying I'm equipped to take care of 6 kids. I'm not saying I have any answers. But I am saying that before I make any calls to anyone, I want to understand the full situation. Fair?" It wasn't fair, not really. These boys deserved professionals, people trained to handle trauma and family placement and legal complexities. But they also deserved someone who would listen before acting, who would see them as people rather than cases to be processed. Ethan looked at his brothers, some silent communication passing between them. Finally he nodded. "Okay, we'll tell you." After Noah sees the doctor, breakfast was a quiet affair. Cole scrambled the remaining eggs, made toast, and watched as the boys ate with slightly less desperation than the night before. Having one hot meal in their stomachs made the second one easier to pace, though they still ate quickly, efficiently, as if food might be taken away at any moment. Noah managed only a few bites before another coughing fit left him gasping. Ethan rubbed his back with the practiced motion of someone who'd done this many times before, whispering reassurances that seemed to help more than medicine could. After breakfast, Cole grabbed his keys and gestured toward the door. "Let's go." Everyone in the truck. The boys gathered their meager belongings with that same efficient speed he'd noticed before, stuffing everything into the single backpack. They moved like a military unit, each knowing their role, working in synchronized silence. It was both impressive and heartbreaking. Cole's truck was a 2015 Ford F-250, built for hauling freight and navigating rough roads. It had an extended cab that theoretically could seat 6, though it would be tight. The boys squeezed in without complaint, the older ones taking the jump seats while Noah ended up between Ethan and Cole in the front. The drive to Millerton took them through landscape that showcased Wyoming's harsh beauty, endless stretches of high desert punctuated by distant mountains, the sky so vast it seemed to swallow everything beneath it. The boys stared out the windows with expressions that suggested they'd traveled a long distance before ending up in Rockridge. "Where are you from originally?" Cole asked, keeping his voice casual. Ethan glanced at him, calculating again. "Nebraska. Outside Omaha. That's a long way from here. We've been traveling for a while." "How long?" A pause. 3 weeks. Maybe 4 weeks. 6 boys, the youngest only 5, traveling alone for a month. The implications were staggering. "And how'd you get this far?" "Buses mostly. Some trains. Walked when we had to." Ethan's hand rested on Noah's shoulder. "Noah got sick about a week ago. We thought it was just a cold, but it kept getting worse. And before Nebraska?" "Where were you before that?" Ethan's jaw tightened, and Cole recognized he'd pushed too far too fast. "You said after the doctor." "We'll tell you after the doctor." The clinic appeared on the outskirts of Millerton, a converted house with a hand-painted sign that read Carson Medical Services. The parking lot held only one other vehicle, an ancient pickup that probably belonged to the doctor himself. Doc Carson was in his 70s, with white hair, weathered skin, and eyes that had seen everything and judged very little. He looked up from his desk when they entered, his gaze moving from Cole to the 6 boys with professional assessment. "Morning, Cole. Been a while." "Morning, Doc. Got a situation here." "This is Noah. He's got a bad cough, fever probably. Needs checking out?" Carson stood, his attention focusing on the smallest boy with the instant concern of someone who genuinely cared about his patients. "How long's he been sick, son?" Noah looked at Ethan, who answered, "About a week. Maybe 8 days? Let's take a look then." Carson gestured toward the examination room. "Just the patient and 1 guardian. You his father?" This directed at Cole. "No, Cole hesitated. "I'm his brother," Ethan interrupted firmly. "I go where he goes." Carson nodded, understanding passing across his face. "Brother it is then. Come on back, both of you." While Ethan and Noah disappeared into the exam room, Cole waited with the other 4 boys in the small reception area. They sat close together on the worn chairs, their silence heavy with anxiety. Cole recognized the fear in their faces, the terror that someone in authority would ask the wrong questions, make the wrong call, trigger whatever consequences they'd been running from. Marcus, the 11-year-old, finally spoke. "Is Doc Carson going to call the police?" "No," Cole said with more confidence than he felt. "He's just going to help your brother." "People always say they're just going to help," Liam added quietly. "Then they ask questions, make phone calls, and things get worse." "What things got worse?" Cole leaned forward, keeping his voice gentle. "What happened that made you run?" The boys exchanged glances, that silent communication again. Owen, the 7-year-old, whispered something to Caleb that Cole couldn't hear. Finally Marcus spoke. "We were in a group home in Nebraska. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they found us a foster family who could take all 6 of us." His hands twisted together. "But the man who ran it, Mr. Dalton, he wasn't good." Cole's stomach tightened. "Not good how?" "He had rules. Lots of rules. If you broke them, you got punished. And the punishments?" Marcus trailed off, unable or unwilling to continue. He hurt you, Cole said, not a question. Marcus nodded. Liam's hand found his brother's, gripping tight. Ethan tried to protect us, especially Noah, because he's so little. But that just made Mr. Dalton angrier. He said Ethan was a troublemaker, said he was going to have him sent somewhere else, somewhere for difficult kids. So you ran, Cole finished. Ethan planned it. He's good at planning. There was pride in Marcus's voice. We saved food, took money from Mr. Dalton's desk drawer, waited until he and his wife went to church. Then we left. And no one came after you? No police, no social workers. Mr. Dalton told people we ran away all the time, Liam said. Told them we were troubled kids, that it was normal for us to take off for a few days. He said we always came back when we got hungry. Understanding dawned. He didn't report you missing because that would trigger an investigation. Questions about why 6 boys would run away from his facility. We didn't mean to come this far, Marcus continued. We were just trying to get to Colorado. Ethan heard there were better programs there, places that wouldn't split us up. But money ran out faster than we thought, food too. Then Noah got sick, and we couldn't keep moving, and he gestured helplessly at the clinic around them. Before Cole could respond, the examination room door opened. Carson emerged with Ethan and Noah, his expression grave. Bronchitis, trending toward pneumonia. The boy needs antibiotics, rest, proper nutrition, and warmth. Another few days in the cold, and this could have gone very bad, very fast. He handed Cole a prescription slip. Pharmacies 2 blocks west. Get these filled, follow the dosage exactly. He should start improving in 48 hours, but he needs to complete the full course even if he feels better. Carson's eyes met Cole's, a wealth of unspoken questions in that gaze. He also needs a stable place to recover. Stress makes everything worse, especially in children. Understood, Cole said, taking the prescription. What do I owe you? $200 for the exam and consultation. Carson moved behind his desk, pulling out paperwork. But before I can release the patient, I need some information for my records. Parents' names, emergency contacts, insurance information if you have it. The temperature in the room dropped. The boys went rigid, preparing to bolt. Ethan's hand found Noah's, gripping tight. Cole made another decision, one that was probably going to complicate his life considerably. His name is Noah Brennan. These are his brothers, Ethan, Marcus, Liam, Owen, and Caleb, also Brennan. I'm their uncle. Parents are deceased. I'm the emergency contact. No insurance, but I'll pay cash. Carson's pen hovered over the form. He looked at Cole for a long moment, then at the boys, then back at Cole. Something shifted in his expression, not judgment, but understanding. Brennan, he repeated, writing the name. And your address, Mr. Brennan? Cole recited his warehouse address, watching as Carson filled out the form with careful precision. When he finished, he slid it into a folder without another word. Like I said, 200. Cash is fine. Carson stood, extending his hand to Cole. Take care of those boys. Mr. Brennan, and if young Noah's condition worsens, fever spikes, trouble breathing, confusion, you bring him back immediately. Understood. Understood. Thank you, Doc. Just doing my job. But they both knew it was more than that. Carson could have insisted on proper documentation, could have made the call that regulations required. Instead, he'd chosen to see 6 boys who needed help, rather than a situation that needed reporting. Outside, in the parking lot, the boys clustered around Cole with expressions of stunned disbelief. You told him we're your nephews, Ethan said. Why would you do that? Because stranger who found you on a train platform raises more questions than I wanted to answer right now, Cole replied, unlocking the truck. And because sometimes you need a story that gets you through the moment while you figure out the truth. But you lied to a doctor, Marcus said. As if this violated some fundamental law of the universe. Yeah, I did. Cole opened the passenger door, helping Noah climb in. Sometimes adults lie to protect kids. Sometimes the system that's supposed to help actually makes things worse. And sometimes you have to decide whether following rules is more important than doing what's right. He didn't know if they understood the weight of what he'd just done, claiming them as family. creating a paper trail that could be traced, committing himself to a deception that could have serious legal consequences. He wasn't sure he fully understood it himself, but as they drove to the pharmacy, Noah dozed between them, and the other boys relaxed fractionally in the back seat. Cole knew he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. These weren't just 6 homeless boys anymore. In the eyes of at least one medical professional, they were his family. And that simple lie, told to protect them, had just become the most complicated truth of his life. The pharmacy filled the prescription without incident. Cole paid in cash, adding cough syrup, fever reducers, and a basic first aid kit to the order. On the way back to Rockridge, he stopped at a grocery store, sending the older boys in with a list and money while he stayed in the truck with Noah. "You didn't have to help us," Noah said quietly, his voice raspy. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to Cole. "Yeah, I did. Why?" Cole looked down at the small boy, saw the exhaustion and illness, and something else. A flicker of hope that was terrified to fully emerge. "Because you needed help and I was there. Sometimes it's that simple. Nothing's ever that simple," Noah said with the world-weary wisdom of someone who'd learned trust was dangerous. "You sound like your brother. Ethan says we can't rely on anyone but each other. He says adults always let you down eventually." "Ethan's had some hard experiences," Cole said carefully. "But he's wrong about one thing. Some adults will let you down. Some won't. The trick is figuring out which is which. How do we figure that out? Time, mostly. And paying attention to what people do, not just what they say." Noah considered this, his young face serious. "What are you going to do? After I'm better?" It was the question Cole had been avoiding since he'd claimed them as his nephews in Doc Carson's office. The smart thing would be to contact legitimate authorities, explain the situation, let professionals handle placement. The boys deserved proper care, legal protection, and resources he couldn't provide alone. But he remembered what Marcus had said about the group home in Nebraska, about Mr. Dalton and his punishments. He thought about 6 boys choosing to risk everything rather than stay in a system that was supposed to keep them safe. "I don't know yet," Cole admitted. "But I'm not going to make that decision without talking to all of you first." "There?" Noah nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. When the other boys returned with grocery bags full of food, the drive back to Rockridge was quieter, the tension slightly eased. Back at the warehouse, Cole administered Noah's first dose of antibiotics and settled him on the cot with extra blankets. The boy was asleep within minutes, his breathing already seeming easier with the promise of medicine working in his system. The other 5 boys arranged themselves around the office, no longer quite as guarded but still watchful. Ethan stood near the door, as if maintaining the option of flight even now. "You said after the doctor we'd talk," Cole said, settling into his desk chair. "So let's talk. I need the whole story. Everything that happened in Nebraska, everything that brought you here." Ethan looked at his brothers, that silent communication passing between them again. Then he took a breath and began, "Our parents died 2 years ago. Car accident. My dad's brother was supposed to take us, but he died 6 months later. Heart attack. No other relatives, so we went into foster care." He spoke calmly, clinically, as if reciting facts that had happened to someone else. "They tried to place us together, but 6 kids is a lot. Most families only want 1 or 2. So they sent us to Hartfield Group Home in Omaha. Temporary, they said. Just until they found the right permanent placement. But Hartfield was where you met Mr. Dalton," Cole prompted. "Raymond Dalton." He and his wife Geneva ran the facility. On paper, it looked good. Clean, structured, licensed by the state. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. But Dalton had a system. Rules for everything. How you stood, how you spoke, how you ate. Break a rule, you got disciplined. What kind of discipline? Ethan's jaw tightened. Missing meals. Isolation rooms. Extra chores. Sometimes physical punishment. Nothing that left marks where inspectors could see them. And if you complained, if you tried to tell anyone, he'd separate you from your siblings. Send one brother to a different facility as punishment. "So you stayed quiet to keep your family together," Cole said. "What choice did we have?" Ethan's voice rose slightly. Every time a social worker came, Dalton would have us recite how grateful we were, how well he treated us. If we didn't perform perfectly, one of us would be transferred for a few days as a reminder, and nobody noticed. No inspectors, no counselors. Dalton was smart. He knew how to work the system. He'd had that facility for 15 years, good reputation, connections with county officials. Who were they going to believe? Him or a bunch of foster kids with behavioral issues? The bitterness in Ethan's voice was cutting. So you planned an escape for 3 months. I figured out the schedule, saved food, took money whenever I could from petty cash. Then Dalton started talking about sending me to a facility for difficult adolescents. Said I was a bad influence on my brothers. I knew if he separated us, we'd never get back together. So we ran. The story poured out then. The careful planning, the night they'd slipped out during church services, the long journey across Nebraska and into Wyoming. They'd used buses when they could afford tickets, hitchhiked when they couldn't, walked when no other option existed. We were heading for Colorado, Marcus added. Ethan heard they had better programs there. Places that tried to keep families together. But money ran out in Cheyenne, Liam continued, and Noah got sick. We couldn't keep moving with him coughing like that. Someone would notice, ask questions. So we hopped a freight train, Ethan finished. Rode it to Rockridge. The platform looked abandoned, sheltered. We thought we could rest there for a few days, let Noah recover, figure out our next move. And instead you got found by me, Cole said. Yeah. Ethan met his eyes directly. So now you know. We're runaways from a licensed group home. Technically, what you're doing right now is illegal, harboring minors without authorization. If Dalton reported us missing, if anyone connects us to you, you could face serious charges. Cole absorbed this, the full weight of what he'd stepped into settling onto his shoulders. Ethan was right. Blaming them as his nephews, providing shelter without contacting authorities, lying to a medical professional, all of it was legally problematic at best, potentially criminal at worst. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to contact social services immediately. Explain the situation. Let them investigate the group home, trust the system to handle it properly. But Cole had trusted systems before, had believed in protocols and proper channels and following the rules. And 15 years ago in Chicago, that trust had gotten people killed. Here's what's going to happen, he said slowly, thinking it through even as he spoke. You're going to stay here while Noah recovers. That's non-negotiable. He needs warmth, rest, and to complete his antibiotics. That gives us about 2 weeks. And then, Ethan challenged, and then we figure out the next step together. But we're going to do it right. Legal, documented, protected. I'm going to make some calls, talk to people I trust, and find out what our options are. There has to be a way to keep you together and safe without sending you back to Dalton. There isn't, Ethan said flatly. I researched it. 6 boys, no relatives willing to take us, limited foster home space. The system wants to split us up. It's easier administratively. They call it increasing placement opportunities. Then we'll find a way around the system. How? I don't know yet, Cole admitted. But I know someone who might. A lawyer in Jackson. He handles complicated family cases. Let me reach out, see what's possible, and if nothing's possible. Ethan's voice was quiet but determined. If the only option is going back to Dalton or being split up. Cole met the boy's gaze, seeing the fierce protectiveness there, the absolute refusal to accept either outcome. He recognized it because he'd felt the same thing once, before everything fell apart. Then we'll figure out a third option, he said. Even if I have to make it up as I go along. The promise hung in the air between them, fragile and weighty. 6 boys who'd learned not to trust adults, and 1 man who'd spent 15 years avoiding exactly this kind of responsibility, connected by circumstances that neither had chosen but both now had to navigate. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft and silent, covering Rockridge in white. Inside the warehouse, a sick child slept while his brothers watched a stranger who just promised to help them, their expressions hovering between hope and fear. Cole pulled out his phone, finding the contact he hadn't called in 5 years. Martin Reeves, family lawyer, Jackson, Wyoming. A man who'd once told him, "If you ever need help, call." He stared at the number, his thumb hovering over the dial button. Knowing that making this call would be another point of no return, then Noah coughed in his sleep, and Ethan automatically moved to check on him, his movements gentle and practiced. 6 brothers who'd survived 2 years of loss and abuse and a month of running, still intact because one 13-year-old had refused to let his family break apart. Cole pressed dial. It was time to stop running from responsibility and start running towards something better. For all of them, Martin Reeves arrived 3 days later, driving a silver Lexus that looked absurdly out of place against the industrial backdrop of Cole's warehouse. He was in his mid-50s, impeccably dressed despite the rural setting, with steel-grey hair and sharp eyes that assessed everything in seconds. Cole watched from the loading dock as Reeves parked and emerged, briefcase in hand. They hadn't seen each other since the inquiry, since the hearings that had dismantled Cole's life piece by piece. The fact that Reeves had agreed to come at all spoke volumes about either loyalty or curiosity. "Brennan," Reeves said, extending his hand, "you look like hell." 5 years of Wyoming wilderness will do that. Cole shook the offered hand, feeling the gulf of time and circumstance between them. "Thanks for coming. Your call was intriguing. 6 boys, no legal guardian, fleeing an abusive group home." Reeves's eyes scanned the warehouse property. "You certainly know how to complicate your life. Where are they?" "Inside. Fair warning, they're not great with strangers, especially adults in suits." "Most of my clients aren't." Reeves followed Cole toward the office entrance. "Before we go in, I need to understand your position here. You said on the phone you claimed them as your nephews at a medical clinic. That's fraud, Cole. Document fraud involving minors. If this goes sideways, you're looking at serious charges." "I know. Do you?" "Because harboring runaways, lying to medical professionals, and interfering with state custody, these aren't minor infractions. The prosecutor in Nebraska could make an example of you if they wanted." Cole stopped at the door, turning to face his old friend. "Martin, these kids spent 2 years being abused in a state-licensed facility. The system failed them. I'm not sending them back into that same system without guarantees they'll be protected." Noble sentiment. "Legally complicated execution." Reeves adjusted his briefcase. "Let me talk to them, assess the situation. Then we'll discuss options, if any exist." Inside, the boys had arranged themselves in what Cole now recognized as their defensive formation. Ethan stood at the front, shoulders squared despite his slender frame. Marcus and Liam flanked him, creating a second line. Owen and Caleb hovered near the back, ready to grab Noah if things went wrong. The smallest boy sat on the cot, still weak but improving after 3 days of antibiotics and proper food. Their eyes tracked Reeves with the wary intensity of prey animals watching a predator. "Boys, this is Martin Reeves. He's a lawyer from Jackson. I asked him to come help us figure out your legal situation." Cole gestured toward the chairs he'd arranged. "Martin, these are the Brennan brothers. Ethan, Marcus, Liam, Owen, Caleb, and Noah." Reeves's eyebrow raised fractionally at the surname, but he said nothing, settling into a chair with practiced ease. "Gentlemen, Cole's told me some of your story, but I'd like to hear it directly from you. Everything you're comfortable sharing." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Why should we trust you?" "Excellent question." Reeves opened his briefcase, pulling out a legal pad. "You shouldn't, not automatically. Trust is earned, not given. But here's what I can offer: attorney-client privilege. Anything you tell me is confidential. I can't share it with authorities without your permission, even if Cole asked me to." "What about him?" Marcus gestured toward Cole. "He's not your client. Actually, for the purposes of this consultation, you all are. Cole's paying my fee, but you're the clients." Reeves's expression softened slightly. "I specialize in family law, specifically cases involving children in difficult situations. I've been practicing for 28 years. I've seen a lot of things, and very little shocks me anymore. So talk to me. Help me understand what we're working with." The boys exchanged glances, that silent communication Cole was learning to read. Finally, Ethan spoke. Our parents died in a car accident 26 months ago. Dad's brother was supposed to take us, but he had a heart attack 6 months later. No other family. We got placed in Hartfield Group Home in Omaha, run by Raymond and Geneva Dalton. I know Hartfield, Reeves said quietly, making notes. It's been operational for what, 15 years? 17, Ethan corrected. Dalton's had it that long. It's licensed, inspected, approved by Nebraska Social Services. Looks perfect on paper, but it's not. No. Ethan's hands clenched. Dalton has rules. Hundreds of them. How you stand, sit, speak, eat, sleep. Everything's controlled. Break a rule, you get punished. Reeves's pen moved steadily across the paper. What kind of punishment? Missed meals. Isolation. He's got a room in the basement, no windows, just a mat on the floor. Sometimes 12, 24 hours alone in the dark. Ethan's voice remained steady, clinical. Physical discipline. Nothing that leaves obvious marks. He's careful about that. Did you report this to anyone? Social workers, teachers, inspectors? Dalton coached us before every inspection, Marcus interjected. Told us exactly what to say. If we didn't follow the script, someone would get sent away as punishment. He'd transfer one of us to another facility for a week, sometimes 2, to teach us compliance. So you stayed quiet to keep your family together, Reeves said, understanding in his voice. For 2 years. Ethan's composure cracked slightly. But last month, Dalton started talking about sending me to a residential facility for troubled teens. Said I was a bad influence, too defiant. I knew if he separated me from my brothers, we'd never get back together. So we ran. Reeves looked up from his notes. All 6 of you? The youngest is what, 5? Noah turned 5 in September, Ethan confirmed. It wasn't easy. But staying was worse. Tell me about the escape. Timeline, route, how you survived. Over the next hour, the boys detailed their journey. The months of planning. The night they'd slipped away during church services, the bus rides and freight trains, and long stretches of walking. They'd navigated 4 states, survived on gas station food and charity when they could get it, slept wherever shelter could be found. We were heading for Colorado, Liam explained. Ethan read that they have better programs for keeping siblings together. We thought maybe if we could get there, find a different social services office, they might help us. But Noah got sick in Cheyenne, Owen added, his young voice barely above a whisper. Couldn't stop coughing. We were scared someone would notice, call the police. So you hopped a freight train to Rockridge, Reeves finished. How did you know about this town? We didn't, Ethan admitted. We just got on the first train heading west, rode it until it stopped. The platform looked abandoned. We thought we could rest there until Noah recovered, and then Cole found you. Yeah, Ethan looked at Cole. He gave us food, shelter, took Noah to a doctor, didn't call the police even though he could have. Reeves turned to Cole. When exactly did you claim them as your nephews? At Doc Carson's clinic. He needed information for his records. I made a judgment call. A judgment call that constitutes fraud, Reeves said mildly. But we'll table that discussion for now. He returned his attention to the boys. Has anyone from Hartfield Group Home contacted authorities about your disappearance? Any missing persons reports filed? Dalton wouldn't report us, Marcus said with certainty. He tells people we run away all the time. That we're troubled, difficult kids. He says we always come back when we get hungry or scared. Smart, Reeves murmured. Filing a report would trigger an investigation into why 6 boys fled his facility. He's avoiding scrutiny. So we're not officially missing. Liam asked hopefully, not officially, which is both good and bad. Good because it means no active search. Bad because it means Dalton's counting on you, either returning or disappearing entirely. He's gambling that you won't surface somewhere with the resources to investigate your claims. But we did surface, Ethan said. We found Cole, and now you're here. Does that mean you can help us? Reeves set down his pen, steepling his fingers in that thoughtful gesture lawyers seem to practice. I can try, but I need you to understand the challenges we're facing. He ticked off points on his fingers. 1, you're minors without legal guardianship. 2, you fled a state-licensed facility, which technically makes you runaways regardless of the abuse you suffered. 3. You're in Wyoming, which means interstate jurisdiction issues if we want to pursue action against Dalton in Nebraska. 4. You're 6 boys, and the foster system is already strained. Finding placement for all of you together is extremely difficult, so we're screwed, Ethan said flatly. I didn't say that. I said it's complicated. Reeves pulled out another document. Here's what I propose. First, we document everything. I record your statements about the abuse, photograph any physical evidence, scars, marks, anything that corroborates your claims. Then I contact Nebraska Social Services through official channels, filing a formal complaint against Hartfield Group Home. They'll just send us back, Marcus protested. Not immediately. Filing a complaint triggers a mandatory investigation. During that investigation, you'll be placed in temporary protective custody. That's where things get interesting. Reeves looked at Cole. If Cole were willing to apply for emergency foster placement, you could potentially stay here during the investigation. Cole felt 6 pairs of eyes swing toward him. What would that require? Background check, home inspection, character references. Given your military and law enforcement background, you'd likely pass the background check easily. The warehouse would need some modifications to meet residential standards. And you'd need to complete a crash course in foster parent training. How long would temporary placement last? Cole asked. Months, potentially. Abuse investigations take time, especially when they involve interstate agencies. During that period, you'd be the boys' legal guardian. They'd stay here, attend school, receive counseling if needed. It wouldn't be permanent, but it would be legal. And after the investigation, Ethan pressed. What happens if they prove Dalton abused us? Best case scenario, his license gets revoked, facility shut down, and you're freed from his custody permanently. Then we pursue long-term placement options, either foster care or, if Cole's willing, formal adoption. The word adoption hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Cole saw the boy's expressions shift, hope warring with fear of hoping for too much. He felt his own chest tighten with the weight of what Reeves was suggesting. I can't adopt 6 kids, Cole said, his voice strained. I'm barely equipped to take care of myself. This warehouse isn't a home. I work 16-hour days. I don't know anything about raising children. Most people don't when they start, Reeves replied calmly. But adoption is a long process anyway, a year, sometimes 2. You'd have time to figure it out. The question isn't whether you're ready now. The question is whether you're willing to try. Cole looked at the boys. At Ethan's fierce protectiveness, Marcus's quiet strength, Liam's cautious optimism. At Owen and Caleb, still so young and scared. At Noah, small and fragile, but fighting to get stronger every day. 6 lives that had somehow become entangled with his own, through nothing more than chance and a cry in the night. He'd spent 15 years running from responsibility, from connection, from anything that might require him to be more than a man alone. The Chicago fire had taught him that caring about people meant risking unbearable loss. He'd sworn never to put himself in that position again, but these boys weren't asking him to save them. They'd already saved themselves by running, by surviving, by refusing to let their family break apart. They were just asking for a safe place to land while they figured out what came next. Let's start with temporary placement, Cole said carefully. Get them legal status, keep them together during the investigation. After that, we'll see. It wasn't the answer Ethan wanted. Cole could see the disappointment flicker across the boy's face. But it was honest, and that counted for something. Fair enough, Reeves said, making more notes. I'll start the paperwork today. Emergency foster placement applications typically take 2 to 3 weeks to process in Wyoming. During that time, you'll need to maintain the current arrangement quietly. No school enrollment, no official documentation, nothing that creates a paper trail before we have legal standing. So we're still hiding, Liam said. You're staying safe, Reeves corrected. There's a difference. Once the application is approved, everything changes. You'll have legal protection, access to education, medical care without deception. But until then, discretion is critical. What about Dalton? Marcus asked. When you file the complaint, won't he know where we are? The complaint will be filed anonymously through a third party. He'll know an investigation's been triggered, but not by whom or where you're located. By the time he connects the dots, you'll have legal protection. Ethan's expression remained skeptical, but Cole could see him working through the logic, trying to find the flaws in Reeves's plan. The boy had spent 2 years learning not to trust systems, not to believe in adult promises. No lawyer's smooth words would undo that damage quickly. I need to talk to my brothers, Ethan said finally. Alone? Of course. Reeves stood, closing his briefcase. Cole, why don't you show me around the property? I'll need detailed notes for the home inspection report. Outside, Reeves waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. Those boys have been through hell. I know, Ethan especially. He's carrying the weight of 5 other lives on his shoulders. That's not sustainable, Cole. He needs to be a kid, not a parent. He needs to keep his family together, Cole countered. That's his priority. Everything else is secondary, which is exactly why they need you. Reeves surveyed the warehouse, the surrounding property, mentally cataloguing what would need changing. You're the first adult who's shown them that protection doesn't have to come with conditions. That help doesn't automatically mean separation. Do you understand how rare that is for kids in their situation? Cole kicked at a loose stone. I'm not equipped for this, Martin. 6 kids, full-time? I can barely keep this business afloat. Then hire help, restructure, adapt. Reeves's voice took on an edge. You called me for legal advice. Here's some free personal advice. Whatever happened in Chicago, whatever guilt you're carrying, punishing yourself by hiding out here isn't going to fix it. Those boys are giving you a chance at something bigger than your past mistakes. Don't waste it. The words hit harder than intended because they were true. Cole had been hiding for 15 years, convincing himself that isolation was penance, that staying disconnected protected everyone. But maybe it just protected him from having to risk caring again. The home inspection, Cole said, changing the subject. What needs to happen? Reeves pulled out his phone, making notes. The warehouse needs to be converted into proper living space. Separate sleeping areas, adequate kitchen facilities, bathroom that can handle multiple children. Nothing fancy, but it has to meet state residential standards. How much time do I have? 3 weeks, maybe 4. I'll expedite the application, but bureaucracy moves slowly. Reeves photographed the exterior, the loading dock, the access road. You'll also need character references. People who can attest to your stability, your suitability as a guardian. I've been a hermit for 15 years. My character references are limited. Doc Carson would probably vouch for you. Anyone else in town you've built relationships with? Cole thought about his interactions over the years. The supply deliveries, the occasional business dealings, the careful distance he'd maintained from everyone. There's Dolores Martinez at the general store, Frank Holloway who delivers fuel, maybe Sheriff Bennett, though I'm not sure recommending someone who's currently harboring runaways is wise. We'll work with what we have. Reeves completed his circuit of the property, returning to stand beside Cole. One more thing. When social services processes this application, they're going to look into your background. The Chicago incident will come up. You need to be prepared to address it. Cole's jaw tightened. It was 15 years ago. I was cleared of wrongdoing. Cleared legally, yes. But it's still part of your history. A fire that killed 3 people, including a child. Questions about whether proper protocols were followed. The investigation that ended your law enforcement career. Reeves's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not judging, Cole. I represented you through all of it. But social services will want to know that you've dealt with that trauma, that you're emotionally stable enough to care for vulnerable children. So what do I do? Be honest. Acknowledge what happened. Explain what you've learned from it. Demonstrate that you've moved forward. And consider therapy. Having a counselor's endorsement wouldn't hurt your application. The thought of dredging up Chicago, of reliving those decisions and their consequences, made Cole's stomach turn. But if it meant keeping the boys safe, keeping them together, he'd do it. Inside the warehouse, the boys were still huddled in discussion. Through the window, Cole could see Ethan speaking intensely while his brothers listened. It was a family meeting, a democratic process where even the youngest had a voice. They were deciding whether to trust this new plan, whether to risk hope one more time. They're going to say yes, Reeves observed. They don't really have another option. That's a hell of a foundation for trust, Cole muttered. It's the foundation they have. You build from there? Reeves checked his watch. I need to get back to Jackson, start the paperwork. I'll be in touch within 48 hours with next steps. In the meantime, keep them safe, keep them hidden, and start thinking seriously about whether you're ready for this to become permanent. I told you I can't, or won't. Reeves met his eyes directly. There's a difference, Cole, and those boys deserve someone who's willing to try, even if they're scared of failing. After Reeves left, Cole returned to the office to find the boys had reached a decision. They sat in their usual formation, but there was something different in their postures, a fractional relaxation, as if they'd released a weight they'd been carrying. We want to do it, Ethan announced. The temporary placement thing. We'll follow the lawyer's plan, stay here during the investigation. If you're willing. I'm willing, Cole confirmed. And after? Noah's small voice carried across the room. After the investigation is done, and Dalton's gone, and we don't have to hide anymore, what happens to us then? It was the question Cole had been avoiding, the one that required an answer he wasn't ready to give. These boys deserved permanence, stability, a home that wouldn't disappear when bureaucracy shifted. They deserved someone committed to them for the long term. He looked at their faces, hope and fear mixed in equal measure. 6 lives hanging on his next words. After, Cole said slowly, we figure it out together. I can't promise everything will be perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I won't abandon you, won't split you up, and won't stop fighting until you're safe. That's the best I can offer right now. Ethan studied him for a long moment, weighing the promise against every broken promise he'd experienced before. Finally, he nodded. That's enough. For now, that's enough. It wasn't a declaration of trust, wasn't a commitment to permanent family, but it was a beginning, a tentative step towards something neither Cole nor the boys fully understood yet. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Rockridge in white silence. Inside the warehouse, 6 boys and 1 man began the complicated process of becoming something more than strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were becoming a family, fragile, uncertain, built on necessity rather than blood, but a family nonetheless. And for the first time in 15 years, Cole Brennan felt the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose worth carrying. The warehouse conversion began the next morning. Cole stood in the cavernous main storage area, blueprint sketches spread across a workbench, trying to envision how to transform industrial space into something resembling a home. The challenge wasn't just structural, it was philosophical. He designed this place for isolation, for keeping the world at arm's length. Now he needed to remake it for connection, for family. You're overthinking it, Ethan said from behind him. The boy had approached silently, a skill he'd perfected from 2 years of trying to avoid Dalton's attention. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just needs to be warm and safe. Cole gestured at the vast empty space. I'm trying to figure out sleeping arrangements. 6 boys need privacy, personal space. But the inspection requires certain specifications. Square footage per child, emergency exits, natural light sources. Split it into sections, Marcus suggested, joining them. He'd been watching from across the warehouse, and his natural curiosity had drawn him over. Put up walls here and here. He traced invisible lines with his finger. 3 bedrooms. Me, Liam, and Owen in one. Ethan and Caleb in another. Noah gets his own because he's still recovering and needs quiet. That leaves the question of where I sleep, Cole said. You got the office already. Just expand it slightly. Ethan studied the space with surprising maturity. The main area can be kitchen and living space. You've already got the bathroom roughed in. Just needs updating to handle multiple people. Cole looked at these 2 boys, 13 and 11, planning living arrangements with the pragmatic efficiency of adults. They'd been forced to grow up too fast. to think about logistics and survival instead of homework and video games. The unfairness of it settled like lead in his stomach. "All right," he said. "Let's start with walls. I've got lumber and basic tools. You know how to use a measuring tape?" Marcus's face lit up. "Dad taught me before the accident. I helped him build a treehouse once, then you're my assistant project manager. Ethan, think you can handle keeping the younger ones occupied while we work?" "I've been doing that for 2 years," Ethan replied with a hint of dark humor. "I think I can manage a few more days." The work consumed them. Cole discovered that physical labor was easier with help, even when that help came from children who'd never swung a hammer before. Marcus proved to have his father's aptitude for construction, measuring twice and cutting once with careful precision. Liam became the materials handler, ferrying supplies with determined efficiency. Even Owen and Caleb contributed, sweeping sawdust and organizing screws with the seriousness of people doing important work. Only Noah remained on the sidelines, still too weak for physical labor but watching everything with wide, observant eyes. Cole noticed the boy drawing in a notebook he'd found somewhere, sketching the warehouse's transformation with surprising detail. "You're good at that," Cole commented during a break, looking at Noah's drawings. Noah ducked his head shyly. "My mom used to draw. She taught me before she died," Cole finished gently when the boy trailed off. "Yeah." Noah's pencil moved across the page, adding shading to his sketch of the emerging bedroom walls. "Do you think she'd be happy? That we found you, I mean? That we're not on the streets anymore?" The question was so earnest, so weighted with need for reassurance, that Cole felt his throat tighten. "I think she'd be proud of how you boys have taken care of each other. That's what matters most. Ethan says parents always leave eventually. He says the only people you can count on are family." Noah looked up, his young face serious. "But you're not family." "Not really. So why are you helping us?" It was a question Cole had been asking himself for a week now. The easy answer, because they needed help, didn't capture the full truth. The complicated answer involved Chicago, guilt, penance, and a need to prove he could protect people this time. "Maybe family isn't just about blood," Cole said finally. "Maybe it's about who shows up when things are hard, who stays when leaving would be easier." Noah considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Are you going to stay, even when things get hard?" "Yeah," Cole said, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "I am." The boy smiled, small, tentative but genuine, and returned to his drawing. By the end of the first week, the warehouse had been divided into distinct living areas. 3 bedrooms lined the north wall, each roughly 12 by 12 feet, with windows installed to meet building code requirements. The central space had been cleared and reorganized into a kitchen area with a proper stove, refrigerator, and actual counter space, a significant upgrade from Cole's previous hot plate arrangement. A living area took shape near the converted office. With second-hand furniture Cole had purchased from an estate sale in Millerton. The couch was worn but comfortable, the chairs mismatched but functional. It wasn't going to win any interior design awards, but it was beginning to feel like a place where people lived rather than just existed. "We need decorations," Caleb announced one afternoon, surveying the still stark walls. "Real houses have pictures and stuff. What kind of decorations?" Cole asked, genuinely uncertain. His own living space had been deliberately bare for 15 years. "I don't know, just things that make it feel like home instead of a warehouse." The 7-year-old looked around with a critical eye that belied his age. "My friend Tyler's house had pictures of his family everywhere, and drawings we made in school on the refrigerator. We don't have family pictures," Owen said quietly. "They burned in the car with Mom and Dad." The silence that followed was heavy with loss. Cole saw Ethan's jaw tighten, Marcus's shoulders hunch. These boys had lost more than parents. They'd lost the physical evidence of their family's existence, the photographs and mementos that proved they'd once belonged to something. "Then we make new pictures," Cole said decisively. "Noah, you're the artist. How about you draw something for the living room? Caleb, Owen, you too." "Whatever you want." "The walls are yours. What about you?" Liam asked. Don't you have pictures from before? From your family? Cole thought about the boxes in storage, the photographs he'd packed away after Chicago because looking at them hurt too much. His parents, both gone now. His sister, who'd stopped returning his calls years ago. The life he'd left behind. I might have some things, he admitted. I'll look through storage, see what I can find. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Cole pulled down the boxes he'd been avoiding for 15 years. Dust covered the cardboard, and the tape had yellowed with age. Inside were fragments of a life he'd tried to forget. His police academy graduation photo, his parents at his sister's wedding, candid shots from barbecues and holidays when laughter had been easy, and buried at the bottom, the newspaper clippings about the fire. The headlines that had ended his career. 3 dead in residential blaze. Questions raised about police response time. Officer under investigation for protocol violations. Cole stared at the clippings, feeling the old guilt rise like bile. He'd been first on scene, had made the call about whether to wait for fire department backup or attempt entry. He'd chosen to wait, following protocol, playing it safe. And in those 6 minutes before firefighters arrived, a woman and her 2 children had died in the basement, trapped behind a door he could have breached. The investigation had cleared him. Protocol had been followed. His decision was technically correct. But technically correct didn't bring back a 5-year-old girl and her 7-year-old brother. Didn't erase the image of their mother's body, arms wrapped around her children in a final, futile attempt at protection. He'd left Chicago 3 months after the inquiry closed. Left law enforcement, left everything familiar, and disappeared into Wyoming's wilderness to ensure he'd never be responsible for anyone's safety again. And now, 15 years later, he had 6 boys sleeping in the next room, counting on him to keep them safe. Can't sleep. Cole turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway, watching him with those 2 old eyes. Just going through old photos, Cole said, quickly moving the newspaper clippings aside, but Ethan had already seen them. The boy crossed the office, picking up the top clipping and reading it silently. When he looked up, his expression was understanding rather than judgmental. Is that why you live out here alone? Why you didn't want to help us at first? Cole could have lied, could have deflected, but these boys had been lied to enough. Yeah, I made a call once, followed the rules, and people died because of it. After that, I figured the safest thing was to not make calls that affected anyone but myself. But you helped us anyway, Ethan said. Even though it meant being responsible for people again, I didn't really have a choice. You were there, you needed help. You always have a choice. Ethan set down the clipping carefully. Dalton chose to hurt us instead of help us. Social workers chose to believe his lies instead of investigating. You chose to actually listen, to actually see us instead of just processing us like problems to be solved. I'm still figuring this out as I go, Cole admitted. I don't know if I'm doing any of this right. None of us do. That's kind of the point. Ethan glanced back toward the bedrooms where his brothers slept. When we ran from Hartfield, I had a plan for about 48 hours. After that, I was just making it up, hoping we'd find something better before money ran out, or Noah got too sick, or we got caught. But I had to try because staying meant letting my family break apart. He looked at Cole directly. You're trying. That's more than most adults have done for us. So whatever happened in Chicago, whatever guilt you're carrying, maybe it's time to let it go. Those kids you couldn't save, that wasn't your fault. But these kids you can save. We're right here. Don't let your past stop you from helping your future. The words, coming from a 13-year-old who'd survived more than most adults ever faced, hit with devastating accuracy. Cole had spent 15 years punishing himself for one decision, one moment when following protocol had tragic consequences. But maybe punishment wasn't the point. Maybe learning from it was. How'd you get so wise? Cole asked, his voice rough. 2 years with Dalton. You either learn to see things clearly or you break. Ethan's expression softened slightly. I'm glad we found you, Cole, even if you're still figuring things out. At least you're figuring them out with us instead of sending us away. After Ethan returned to bed, Cole sat with the photographs and clippings spread before him. Slowly, deliberately, he separated them. The photos of happy memories went into a box he'd display. The newspaper clippings went into the trash. He couldn't change what happened in Chicago, couldn't bring back those children. But he could honor their memory by not letting their deaths prevent him from protecting the children in front of him now. The next morning, Cole found the boys already awake and working on their decoration project. Noah had drawn an impressive landscape of mountains and trains. Caleb had created a colorful abstract piece that was enthusiastic, if not technically skilled. Owen's contribution was a careful sketch of 6 stick figures holding hands. "That's us," Owen explained, pointing to each figure. "That's Ethan, Marcus, Liam, me, Caleb, and Noah. What about Cole?" Noah asked. "He should be in it too." Owen looked uncertain. "I didn't know if... he's helping us, but he's not really part of the family." Not officially. The casual words stung more than they should have. These boys had been in his life for barely 2 weeks, yet somewhere along the way their presence had stopped being temporary in his mind. "Here," Marcus said, taking Owen's drawing. He added a 7th figure, taller than the others, positioned at the end of the line of brothers. Now it's complete. They hung the drawings in the living area, creating a gallery of their collective existence. Cole contributed a framed photo of his parents and one of himself from his police academy days, younger, more hopeful, before tragedy had taught him about the cost of responsibility. The transformation continued. Dolores from the general store donated kitchen supplies when Cole explained he was helping out some family. Frank Holloway, the fuel delivery driver, brought by a box of books his own children had outgrown. Even Doc Carson stopped by with a medical kit and instructions on basic child health care. "Town's talking," Carson said quietly during his visit, checking on Noah's recovery. "Wondering about the boys they've seen around your property. You might want to get ahead of that before rumors turn into problems." "I'm working on legal placement," Cole assured him. "Lawyers handling the paperwork. Should be official within a few weeks." "Good, because I like what you're doing here, Cole. But you're going to need more than good intentions if social services comes knocking." The warning was well-intentioned, but it added pressure to an already tense situation. Reeves had submitted the emergency placement application, but bureaucracy moved slowly. Meanwhile, the boys needed structure, routine, normalcy, things Cole had no idea how to provide. "We should be in school," Marcus observed one morning, his textbook hunger obvious. "We've missed almost a month of classes. Once the placement is approved, you'll enroll," Cole promised. "Until then, we need to keep things quiet." "So we're still hiding," Ethan said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Just in a nicer hiding place, for now. But it won't be forever. That's what adults always say. Not forever. Just temporary. Then temporary becomes permanent, and you're still waiting for things to get better." Cole understood the boy's impatience, the exhaustion of being in limbo. "Ethan, I know this is hard, but we're doing this the right way, building a foundation that can't be easily taken apart. That takes time." "We don't have time," Ethan shot back. "Every day we wait, Dalton could be hurting other kids. Every day we hide, we're letting him get away with it. Filing the complaint triggered an investigation. That's happening whether we're visible or not." "Is it?" Ethan's voice rose. "Or is some bureaucrat in Nebraska shuffling papers and hoping the problem resolves itself? You didn't see what Dalton was like, how good he is at fooling people. He'll pass any inspection they throw at him, and those kids still there will keep suffering, because that's what we all learned to do, suffer quietly and hope someone eventually notices." The outburst revealed the depth of Ethan's guilt. About the children left behind, the survivor's burden of having escaped while others remained trapped. Cole recognized it because he carried the same weight about the family in Chicago. "Then we make sure they notice," Cole said firmly. "We document everything you remember. Build a case so thorough they can't ignore it. But we do it right, Ethan. We do it in a way that protects you and your brothers while also helping the kids still at Hartfield." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out. Together." The promise seemed to ease something in Ethan's rigid posture. The boy nodded once and walked away, but Cole could see the wheels turning in his head, the plans forming. Ethan was a fighter, someone who took action rather than waiting for rescue. It was what had saved his brothers, but it could also put them at risk if he decided patience was taking too long. That night, Cole called Reeves with an update and a question. Is there a way to expedite the investigation in Nebraska? The boys are getting restless, and Ethan's worried about the kids still at Hartfield. Investigations move at their own pace, Reeves replied. But I can make some calls, apply pressure where appropriate. The more documentation you can provide, the stronger the case becomes. Detailed accounts, specific dates, names of other children who witnessed abuse, anything that corroborates their story. I'll work with them on that. How's the placement application looking? It's moving. Background check came back clean, as expected. Home inspection is scheduled for next week. If everything passes, you could have approval within 10 days. 10 more days of limbo. 10 more days of the boys being technically illegal residents in Cole's warehouse. 10 more days of hoping no one asked too many questions. We can do 10 days, Cole said, more to convince himself than Reeves. There's one more thing, Reeves added. The Chicago incident came up during the background check. You're going to need to address it directly with the social worker who conducts the home inspection. They'll want reassurance that you've processed that trauma, that it won't affect your ability to care for the boys. Cole thought about Ethan's words, about letting go of guilt that served no purpose except self-punishment. I'll handle it. After hanging up, Cole found Noah sitting on the new couch, the stuffed rabbit he'd been carrying since before Cole met him tucked under his arm. The boy looked small in the oversized furniture, young and vulnerable. Can I ask you something? Noah said quietly. Of course. Do you want us here? Really want us, I mean. Not just because you feel bad for us, or because it's the right thing to do, but because you actually want us to stay. The question deserved honesty, not platitudes. Cole sat down beside the boy, considering his answer carefully. When I first found you on that platform, I wanted you to be someone else's problem. I'd spent 15 years avoiding exactly this situation, being responsible for people who needed protecting. Noah's face fell, and Cole quickly continued. But then I got to know you. All of you. Saw how hard you fight to stay together, how much you care about each other. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about obligation and started being about family. So, yeah, Noah, I want you here. All of you, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The boy's small hand found Cole's larger one, holding on tight. Good, because I want to stay too. We all do. Even Ethan, though he won't say it because he's scared of hoping for too much. Hoping is scary, Cole agreed. Especially when you've been disappointed before. But sometimes you have to risk hope anyway, because the alternative is giving up. And none of you strike me as the giving up type. Noah smiled, that shy expression that transformed his whole face. We learned from the best. Ethan never gives up, ever, even when things seem impossible. Then we'll follow his example, Cole said. We'll keep fighting for this family, keep building something worth hoping for. Deal? Deal. That night, as Cole lay in his converted office, no longer a hermit's retreat but a father figure's sanctuary, he listened to the sounds of 6 boys sleeping in nearby bedrooms. Soft breathing, the occasional cough from Noah, Caleb's sleep-talking, the creak of someone rolling over in bed, sounds of family, of connection, of a life that included other people and all the complexity that came with them. The warehouse had been transformed from industrial space into something approaching a home. But the real transformation, Cole was beginning to understand, wasn't in the building. It was in himself, in the slow dismantling of walls he'd built around his heart, in the tentative opening to the possibility that caring about people didn't automatically mean failing them. 10 more days until the home inspection. 10 more days until legal standing. 10 more days until they could stop hiding and start actually living. He could do 10 days. They could all do 10 days. And after that, they'd figure out the next step together. As a family, imperfect, unconventional, built from necessity and choice in equal measure, but a family nonetheless. The call came on day 8, 2 days before the scheduled home inspection. Cole was outside teaching Marcus how to change the oil in his truck when his phone rang with an unknown Nebraska number. Something cold settled in his stomach as he answered. "Mr. Brennan? This is Raymond Dalton. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Cole's hand tightened on the phone. He gestured for Marcus to go inside, waiting until the boy was out of earshot before responding. "I don't know what you're talking about. 6 boys, brothers, ages 5 through 13. Dalton's voice was smooth, cultured, nothing like the monster the boys had described. "They disappeared from my facility 4 weeks ago." Imagine my surprise when a colleague mentioned seeing children matching their description at a medical clinic in Millerton, Wyoming. With a man who claimed to be their uncle, lots of kids fit that description, not with the specific medical history I have on file. Not with Noah's chronic respiratory issues and distinctive birthmark on his left shoulder. Dalton paused, letting the implications sink in. Doc Carson is discreet, but not everyone in his office shares that quality. A nurse mentioned the visit to her sister, who happens to volunteer at a shelter I support. Small world, isn't it? Cole's mind raced. Carson had been careful, had asked minimal questions, but they'd underestimated the reach of small-town gossip, the networks that connected seemingly isolated communities. "Even if I knew where these boys were," Cole said carefully, "they're not your property to reclaim. Actually, they are. Legal custody assigned by Nebraska Social Services. I have documentation, Mr. Brennan. What do you have? A fraudulent claim of being their uncle? Harboring runaways? Interference with lawful custody?" Dalton's tone remained pleasant, but steel ran underneath. "I've already contacted Wyoming authorities. Sheriff Bennett should be receiving a call from my lawyer within the hour. You'll be arrested, and those boys will be returned to Hartfield where they belong." They told me about Hartfield, about your discipline methods, about the isolation rooms and the punishments that don't leave visible marks. "Did they?" Dalton sounded amused. "And you believed them? 6 troubled children with documented behavioral issues, known for fabricating stories to avoid consequences, against my 15-year record of successful child rehabilitation. Any court in the country will see through their lies. Mr. Brennan, just as every social worker and judge has for the past 2 years. There's an investigation already underway," Cole said, though he wasn't certain how far Reeves had gotten. "Complaints have been filed. Anonymous complaints trigger routine inquiries, not investigations. I've been through 7 of them in 15 years. My facility passes every inspection because there's nothing to find. Those boys will tell you anything they think you want to hear, but in the end, the truth prevails. And the truth is, they're runaways who need structure, discipline, and professional care, which you cannot provide." Dalton's confidence was chilling because it was probably justified. He'd perfected his system over 15 years, knew how to hide abuse behind administrative competence. The boys had said it themselves. He passed every inspection, fooled every social worker, maintained a spotless reputation while terrorizing the children in his care. "What do you want?" Cole asked, though he already knew. "Cooperation. Release the boys to Sheriff Bennett when he arrives. Sign a statement confirming they appeared at your property as runaways and you were attempting to contact proper authorities. In exchange, I'll recommend minimal charges, maybe just a fine for delayed reporting. You'll avoid prison, and those boys will return to appropriate care." Appropriate care. That's what you call locking 5-year-olds in dark basements? I call it necessary intervention for children who pose dangers to themselves and others. But I don't expect you to understand professional childcare methodology. Dalton's patience seemed to thin. "You have 2 hours, Mr. Brennan. Sheriff Bennett arrives at noon. Either the boys are ready for transfer, or you'll be arrested and they'll be taken anyway. The outcome is the same. You just get to choose whether you're part of it voluntarily or in handcuffs." The line went dead. Cole stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mind spinning through impossible scenarios. 2 hours? Bennett was a reasonable man, but he followed the law. If Dalton had documentation, and of course he did, Men like him always had perfect paperwork. The sheriff would have no choice but to execute the custody transfer. And Cole would be arrested, charged with kidnapping, fraud, interference with legal custody. Everything Reeves had warned about. All the legal consequences he'd accepted as risks were about to become reality. The warehouse door opened. Ethan stood there, his face pale. "We heard. Noah was by the window. Of course they'd heard." These boys had spent 2 years learning to eavesdrop, to gather intelligence that might mean the difference between safety and punishment. "Come inside," Cole said quietly. "We need to talk." The 6 brothers assembled in the living area, their newly decorated home suddenly feeling like a trap rather than a sanctuary. Cole looked at their faces, fear mixed with resignation, hope crumbling under the weight of inevitable disappointment. "Dalton found us," Ethan stated. "Not a question. He's coming to take us back. Sheriff Bennett is coming at noon to execute a custody transfer," Cole confirmed. "Dalton has legal documentation. I don't. Technically, the law is on his side." "We're not going back," Ethan said with absolute finality. "We'll run again. Right now, before the sheriff arrives." "And go where?" Cole asked gently. "You barely survived the first time." Noah's still recovering. Winter's getting worse. You run now, you might not make it to the next town. We'll figure it out. We always do." "No." The word came from Noah, surprisingly firm. The smallest boy stood, the stuffed rabbit clutched tight. "No more running." "I'm tired of running." "Noah," Ethan started. "We found a home, Ethan. We found someone who actually cares about us. I don't want to give that up and go back to being cold and hungry and scared every night." Tears streamed down Noah's face. "I know it's not fair. I know we don't have papers or legal stuff. But this is our home now. Cole is our family. And I don't want to leave." The raw emotion in the 5-year-old's voice broke something in the room. Caleb started crying. Owen wrapped his arms around his younger brother. Even Marcus, usually so controlled, had tears in his eyes. "What do we do?" Liam asked, looking at Cole with desperate hope. "There has to be something we can do." Cole pulled out his phone, dialing Reeves with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. The lawyer answered on the second ring. "We've got a problem," Cole said, explaining Dalton's call in rapid sentences. Reeves swore creatively. "He moved faster than I expected. The investigation hasn't progressed far enough to block custody transfer. If Bennett has proper documentation and a court order, is there anything we can do? Anything legal that buys us time?" Silence on the line, as Reeves thought. "One option. File for emergency protective custody based on imminent danger. It's a long shot, but if you can convince a judge that returning the boys to Dalton poses immediate threat to their welfare, you might get a temporary restraining order. How long would that take? In Wyoming? If I can reach Judge Morrison and she's sympathetic, maybe 90 minutes. If she's not available or doesn't buy the argument, you're out of options." Cole checked his watch. 90 minutes. They had 2 hours before Bennett arrived, which gave them almost no margin for error. "Do it. File whatever you need to file. I'll handle things on this end. Cole, if this doesn't work, if Morrison denies the motion, you're still going to be arrested. The charges will be worse because you'll have actively fought the custody transfer instead of cooperating." "I know." "File it anyway." After hanging up, Cole looked at the boys. "Our lawyer is trying something that might work, but we need to prepare for the possibility that it won't." "Meaning what?" Ethan asked. "Meaning you might have to go back to Hartfield, temporarily, until the investigation proves what Dalton's been doing." "We'll never survive that," Marcus said quietly. "You don't know what he'll do when we return. The punishments for running away, for telling people what he does, they'll be worse than anything before." Cole knew Marcus was right. Dalton would make an example of these boys, would break them so thoroughly that no one would ever believe their accusations again. He'd done it before. The boys had mentioned others who'd tried to report abuse, who'd been corrected until they recanted everything. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen," Cole said, an idea forming. "Ethan, you said you wanted to make sure Dalton couldn't hurt anyone else. That we needed to act instead of waiting for bureaucracy. Yeah, but what if we documented everything right now? On video, all 6 of you telling your stories in detail. Dates, specific incidents, names of other children who witnessed the abuse. We send it to every news station in Nebraska and Wyoming. Make it public before Bennett arrives. Reeves would hate the idea. Public exposure before legal protection was dangerous, potentially compromised the investigation. But conventional approaches had failed these boys for 2 years. Maybe unconventional was what they needed. If we do that, Ethan said slowly, Dalton can't bury it. Even if he takes us back, people will know. They'll be watching. And if enough people watch, Marcus added, social services will have to investigate thoroughly. They won't be able to just do a routine check and move on. It's risky, Cole warned. Your faces will be public. Your story will be everywhere. You won't have privacy or anonymity, and it might not work. Dalton might still convince people you're lying. But at least we'll have tried, Liam said. At least we'll have fought back instead of just accepting that he always wins. Cole looked at each boy in turn, seeing determination replace resignation. They'd been powerless victims for 2 years, trapped in a system that ignored their suffering. This gave them agency, gave them a voice that couldn't be easily silenced. All right, he said, pulling out his phone and setting it to record. Let's tell your story. For the next hour, the boys spoke. Ethan went first, his account clinical and detailed, dates, times, specific punishments for specific infractions. Marcus corroborated, adding incidents Ethan had been shielded from. Liam described the isolation rooms with the precision of someone who'd spent too many hours in darkness. Owen and Caleb talked about watching older boys disappear to the basement and return changed, broken. And Noah, small Noah, who'd been silent for so long, spoke about the fear that never went away, the constant awareness that any mistake could trigger consequences. Cole filmed it all, his phone steady, even as his hands wanted to shake with rage. These children describing systematic abuse with matter-of-fact exhaustion. It was one of the most heartbreaking things he'd ever witnessed. When they finished, Cole had 43 minutes of raw testimony. He immediately sent it to every major news station in Wyoming and Nebraska, every child advocacy organization he could find online, and to Reeves with a message. Nuclear option. Uploaded to cloud storage? If I'm arrested, release it everywhere. His phone rang immediately. Reeves, predictably furious. What the hell did you just do? What needed to be done? Did you reach the judge? Morrison's reviewing the motion now, but Cole, that video, you've just made those boys public targets. Every defense attorney in the country will pick apart their testimony, look for inconsistencies, use their trauma against them. Or every parent in Nebraska will see what's happening to children in state custody and demand accountability, Cole countered. We're out of time for careful legal strategy. Dalton's coming. This is our only leverage, Reeves sighed heavily. Morrison's calling in 5 minutes with her decision. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Cole gathered the boys in the living room. Through the window, he could see a vehicle approaching down the access road. Too early to be Bennett, but the sight sent adrenaline spiking through his system anyway. The vehicle passed by, just a delivery truck heading elsewhere. But the message was clear. Time was running out. Whatever happens, Cole said to the boys, I want you to know something. You're the bravest people I've ever met. You survived 2 years of hell, escaped, and kept your family together through everything. That's not weakness or trouble or any of the labels Dalton put on you. That's strength. Real strength. But strength doesn't always win, Ethan said quietly. No, it doesn't, but it means you never stopped fighting. And that matters more than any single victory or defeat. Cole's phone rang. Reeves. Morrison granted the emergency protective order, the lawyer said without preamble. Temporary custody remains with you pending full investigation. I'm sending the documentation to Bennett now. He won't be able to execute Dalton's transfer order. Relief flooded through Cole so intensely he had to sit down. We won? We bought time. That's not the same as winning. The order is good for 30 days while expedited investigation proceeds. But Cole, that video you sent, it's already been picked up by 3 news stations. This is about to become very public, very quickly. Good, let it be public. Let everyone see what happened to these boys. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Bennett arrived. He was a large man in his late 40s, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much of humanity's dark side. He parked, emerged from his vehicle, and approached the warehouse with the careful deliberation of someone expecting trouble. Cole met him at the door, the printed emergency protective order in hand. "Sheriff, I'm Cole Brennan. I know who you are." Bennett took the document, reading it carefully. "I also just got off the phone with Raymond Dalton's lawyer. He's not happy about this development. I imagine not. He's claiming you kidnapped those boys, that you're interfering with legal custody, that this protective order is based on fabricated abuse allegations. The allegations aren't fabricated. The boys have detailed accounts of systematic abuse over 2 years. My lawyer filed the emergency motion based on credible threat to their welfare." Bennett studied Cole for a long moment. "I've heard the name Hartfield before. Couple years back there was a complaint, another kid claiming abuse. Investigation found nothing. Dalton came out clean, because he's good at hiding what he does. And because children in the system are easy to discredit. Maybe." Bennett folded the protective order, handing it back. "I'm going to need to see the boys. Verify they're safe, not being coerced or manipulated. They're inside. But Sheriff, these kids are scared. They've been through hell. Don't expect them to warm up immediately." Bennett nodded and followed Cole into the converted warehouse. His eyes swept the space, taking in the new bedroom walls, the kitchen area, the children's artwork on the walls. 6 boys stood in a protective cluster, Ethan at the front as always. "Boys," Bennett said gently, crouching down to their level. "I'm Sheriff Bennett. I need to ask you some questions. Make sure you're being treated well here." "Is that all right?" Silence. Then Noah stepped forward, the stuffed rabbit under his arm. "We're safe here. Cole takes care of us. Please don't make us leave. Nobody's making you leave today," Bennett assured him. "But I need to understand what's been happening. Can you tell me why you ran away from Hartfield?" And the boys did, not with the detailed precision of the video testimony, but with the simple honesty of children who'd suffered and finally found safety. They spoke about Dalton's rules, about punishments, about being too scared to tell anyone because they'd seen what happened to kids who reported abuse. Bennett listened, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When they finished, he stood slowly, looking at Cole with new understanding. "I'm going to need copies of that protective order and any other documentation your lawyer has. I'm also going to recommend Nebraska Social Services accelerate their investigation into Hartfield." He glanced at the boys. "These kids stay here for now. But Brennan, you're going to have people watching. Media, lawyers, maybe protesters. That video you released? It's spreading fast. You've turned this into a public battle." "Good," Cole said. "Maybe public pressure will force action that quiet complaints couldn't." After Bennett left, Cole allowed himself to fully feel the magnitude of what had just happened. They'd survived the immediate threat. The boys were safe, at least for 30 days. But Dalton wasn't going to give up. Men like him never did. He'd fight back with lawyers and public relations and every resource he could marshal. The real battle was just beginning. "We did it," Marcus said, wonder in his voice. "We actually fought back and won." "We won the first round," Cole corrected gently. "There will be more. Dalton's not going to let this go. Let him come," Ethan said, his young face fierce. "We're not afraid anymore. We have you. We have each other. And now everyone knows what he's been doing. He can't hide in the shadows anymore." Cole looked at these 6 boys, no longer just victims, but survivors actively fighting for their own protection. They'd been through more than most adults ever faced, yet they still had hope, still had strength, still believed things could get better. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. As a family, they echoed. Outside, the first news van was already pulling up to the property boundary, cameras ready to capture the story that was spreading across social media and news feeds. The story of 6 boys who'd survived abuse, of a man who'd chosen to protect them, of a system that had failed in the fight to make it right. The warehouse that had been Cole's refuge from the world was now the center of attention. The isolation he'd maintained for 15 years was shattered completely, but as the boys gathered around him, their faces reflecting hope and determination, Cole realized he didn't miss that isolation at all. He'd spent 15 years hiding from responsibility, from connection, from the risk of caring about people who might be hurt despite his best efforts. These boys had shown him that risk was worth taking. That family wasn't about guarantees of safety or promises of perfect protection. It was about standing together when threats came, fighting together when battles emerged, and refusing to let fear dictate whether you tried. The next 30 days would determine everything: whether the protective order would hold, whether the investigation would find what the boys knew was there, whether their family could survive the scrutiny and pressure of public attention. But tonight they were together. Safe, fed, protected, the media attention hit like a blizzard. Within 48 hours of the video going public, Cole's warehouse had become ground zero for a story that was spreading across the country. News vans lined the access road. Reporters called his phone constantly. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hartfield 6, No Child Left Behind, Justice for the Boys. Cole stood at the window, watching another television crew set up equipment just beyond his property line. They couldn't come onto his land without permission, but they didn't need to. Telephoto lenses captured everything from the road. It's like we're in a zoo, Marcus observed, standing beside him. Except we're the animals everyone's watching. I'm sorry, Cole said. I didn't think it would get this big this fast. Don't be sorry. This is good. Ethan joined them, holding a tablet where news articles scrolled past. Look at this. Nebraska's governor issued a statement promising a thorough investigation. 3 other families have come forward claiming their kids were abused at Hartfield. Dalton's being buried. He's also lawyering up, Cole countered, showing them his own phone. Dalton had hired Marcus Sheffield, one of the most aggressive defense attorneys in the Midwest. Sheffield had already given 2 interviews, painting the boys as troubled runaways manipulated by an unstable man seeking attention. The media strategy was predictable but effective. Discredit the accusers. Question Cole's motives. Present Dalton as a dedicated professional, unfairly attacked by children who didn't want structure or discipline. Sheffield's calling you a failed cop with a savior complex, Liam read from one article. Says you're exploiting traumatized children to work through your own issues from Chicago. Cole's jaw tightened. Sheffield had done his homework, dug into the fire incident, and twisted it into ammunition. The narrative he was building, Cole as damaged goods, projecting his guilt onto an innocent situation, would resonate with people who wanted simple answers. He's lying, Noah said firmly. You're not exploiting us. You're protecting us. I know that and you know that. But perception matters in court. Cole turned from the window. Reeves is filing motions to exclude character attacks. But Sheffield's good at making mud stick, even when it's not admissible evidence. The boys had been cooped up inside for 2 days, unable to go outside without cameras capturing their every movement. The home inspection had been postponed due to the media circus, which meant their emergency placement remained in legal limbo. Everything hung in balance, dependent on investigations that moved at bureaucratic speed, while public opinion shifted like sand. Cole's phone rang again. He checked the caller ID, Jenny Crawford, producer from National News Network. She'd been calling 3 times a day, with offers for exclusive interviews, prime-time specials, documentary deals. He sent it to voicemail like all the others. Maybe we should talk to them, Ethan suggested. And tell our side of the story directly, instead of letting Sheffield control the narrative. Reeves says no media interviews until after the investigation concludes, Cole reminded him. Anything you say publicly can be used against us in court. Sheffield would twist your words, find inconsistencies, use them to argue you're unreliable witnesses. So we just hide, while Dalton calls us liars on every news channel. Ethan's frustration was palpable. That's not fighting back. That's letting him win the PR battle. Before Cole could respond, his phone rang again. This time it was Reeves. "Turn on Channel 7, the lawyer said without preamble. "Now." Cole grabbed the remote, switching to the local news station. The segment was already in progress, an interview with Raymond Dalton himself. He sat in what looked like his office at Hartfield, perfectly groomed, expression radiating concerned professionalism. "These boys have been through tremendous trauma," Dalton was saying, his voice smooth and sympathetic. "Losing their parents, entering the foster system, it's created behavioral challenges and attachment issues. At Hartfield, we provide structure and therapeutic intervention designed to help them heal. But the allegations they've made are quite serious," the interviewer pressed. "Isolation, physical punishment, emotional abuse." Dalton's expression turned pained. "Children who've experienced trauma often struggle to distinguish between appropriate discipline and abuse. When we set boundaries, necessary boundaries for their own safety, some interpret that as punishment. It breaks my heart that they feel this way, but their perceptions don't reflect the reality of the care we provide." "What about the other families coming forward?" the interviewer asked. 3 more sets of parents have made similar allegations. Sadly, when one family makes accusations, others sometimes follow, hoping for attention or financial settlements. "It's a painful reality of my profession, but I welcome the investigation. I have nothing to hide. Hartfield has passed every inspection for 17 years. Our records are impeccable." The camera cut back to the studio where the anchors discussed the complexity of the case, the he-said-she-said nature of the allegations. By the time the segment ended, Dalton had successfully positioned himself as the reasonable adult dealing with troubled children and an unstable vigilante. Cole muted the television. The boys stood frozen, faces pale with recognition that their abuser was winning the public relations war. "He's so good at lying," Caleb whispered. "He sounds like he actually cares about us." "That's how he's survived this long," Ethan said bitterly. "He's perfected the performance. Caring administrator, misunderstood professional, victim of false accusations. Everyone believes him because he looks and sounds exactly like what people think a good person should be." Cole's phone lit up with messages. Social media posts questioning the boys' credibility, comments suggesting he'd coached them to lie, think pieces about false abuse allegations and their damage to legitimate childcare facilities. The narrative was shifting, doubt creeping in where certainty had been. "We need to respond," Marcus said urgently. "We can't let him control the story." Reeves said. Cole started. "I don't care what Reeves said." Ethan's voice rose, months of suppressed anger finally breaking through. "We've been quiet for 2 years. We followed rules, stayed silent, let adults handle things. And where did that get us? Dalton kept hurting us, kept hurting other kids because everyone believed his lies over our truth. I'm done being quiet." The outburst hung in the air, raw and desperate. Cole saw the other boys watching their older brother, saw the same frustration reflected in their faces. They'd survived abuse by learning to hide, to minimize, to make themselves small. But publicity had given them a voice, and now that voice was being silenced again by lawyers and strategy and fear of saying the wrong thing. "What do you want to do?" Cole asked quietly. Ethan looked surprised that he was being asked, that his opinion mattered. "I want to tell the truth, all of it, not in a carefully edited video, not through lawyers and statements. I want to look into a camera and tell people exactly what Hartfield was like, what Dalton did to us and to other kids. Let them see our faces, hear our voices, and decide who's telling the truth." "Sheffield will crucify you in court," Cole warned. "Every word you say publicly becomes ammunition for his defense. Let him try. Because right now, people are starting to believe Dalton. They're starting to think we made everything up. If we stay silent, we've already lost." Ethan's jaw set with determination. "You said we're family, that we make decisions together. So I'm asking, Can we fight back our way instead of the safe, quiet way that's not working? Cole looked at the other boys. Marcus nodded firmly. Liam's expression was scared but resolved. Owen and Caleb clung to each other but didn't disagree. And Noah, smallest Noah, stepped forward. "I want people to know what happened," he said, his voice stronger than Cole had ever heard it. "I want them to know that Dalton is lying, that we're telling the truth, even if it's scary. These boys had earned the right to fight their own battle, to tell their own story. Cole could protect them by keeping them silent, or he could trust them to be strong enough to face the scrutiny." "All right," he said, pulling out his phone. "We do this live. No editing, no preparation. Just you telling your story directly to anyone who wants to listen. But boys, once we do this, there's no taking it back. Are you sure?" 6 nods, simultaneous and certain. Cole called Jenny Crawford at National News Network. She answered immediately. "You want that interview? We'll give it to you. Tonight. Live. All 6 boys, no restrictions on questions, but I have conditions." "Name them," Jenny said, her professional excitement barely contained. "No audience, just you, me, and the boys. You can ask anything, but if any of them want to stop, we stop. No pressure, no pushing. This is their story to tell on their terms." "Agreed. We can have a crew there in 3 hours. 7 p.m. live broadcast, national feed. Mr. Brennan, you understand this is going to be massive, right? Millions of viewers." "I understand. The boys understand. We'll be ready." After hanging up, Cole turned to find Reeves calling. He answered, bracing for the explosion. "Tell me you didn't just agree to a live interview with NNN, Reeves said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I agreed to a live interview with NNN. Cole, this is legal suicide. Sheffield will have a team analyzing every word, every facial expression, looking for inconsistencies to exploit. The boys are children. They'll be nervous, might contradict themselves, could say something that undermines their credibility. Or they'll tell the truth so powerfully that no amount of legal maneuvering can discredit it," Cole countered. "We're losing the PR war, Martin. Dalton's winning. This is our chance to shift momentum." "By risking everything? By putting traumatized children in front of cameras and hostile cross-examination, by letting them have a voice? They've been silenced for 2 years. Maybe it's time to let them speak." Reeves was quiet for a long moment. "If this goes badly, if they falter, or Sheffield finds ammunition in what they say, the protective order could be challenged. The investigation could be compromised. Everything we've built could collapse. I know, but it's their choice, and I trust them." Another pause. "God help us all. I'll be watching. And Cole, whatever happens, I hope you're right about this." The 3 hours passed in a blur of preparation, not rehearsal, because Cole refused to coach them, but simple logistics, where everyone would sit, how the camera angles would work, what the boys wanted to say first. Jenny Crawford arrived with a minimal crew as promised. 2 cameras, 1 sound technician, and a producer. She was younger than her television persona, suggested maybe 40, with sharp eyes that assessed everything quickly. "Thank you for trusting us with this," she said to the boys, crouching to their level. "I know this is scary, but I promise, this is your time, your story. I'm just here to listen." At 7 p.m., they went live. The warehouse living room had been arranged with the boys seated on the couch, Cole in a chair to the side but visible. Jenny sat across from them, her expression warm but professional. "Good evening, I'm Jenny Crawford, and tonight we bring you a special report on a story that's captivated the nation. 6 brothers who say they escaped from years of abuse at a Nebraska group home, and the man who's protecting them. Ethan, you're the oldest. Can you tell us what life was like at Hartfield Group Home?" Ethan took a breath. Then he began to speak. What followed was 90 minutes of raw, unfiltered testimony. Ethan described the rules, the punishments, the atmosphere of constant fear. Marcus talked about watching younger boys broken by isolation. Liam explained how Dalton used separation as a weapon, threatening to split up families if children didn't comply. Owen and Caleb, despite their youth, spoke with heartbreaking clarity about seeing their older brothers hurt and being unable to help. And Noah, 5-year-old Noah, described the isolation room in detail that no child should possess. The dimensions, the darkness, the cold concrete floor where he'd spent 12 hours alone after crying at dinner. Jenny didn't interrupt, didn't push. She let them talk, let the story unfold naturally. When Sheffield's accusations came up, that they were troubled children manipulated by Cole, Ethan addressed it directly. Cole didn't find us because he was looking for kids to save. He found us because we were hiding in an abandoned train station, freezing and desperate. He didn't manipulate us into making accusations. We told him what happened because it was true, and he believed us when no one else did. Why do you think Mr. Dalton is denying your allegations? Jenny asked gently. Because he's been getting away with it for 17 years, Marcus answered. He's perfected the system. He knows what inspectors look for, knows what answers satisfy social workers. He's charming and professional, and everything looks perfect on paper. But behind closed doors, when no one's watching, he's a monster. The word hung in the air, monster. Not a misguided professional, not someone with different discipline philosophies. A monster who hurt children systematically and hid behind bureaucratic competence. Jenny turned to Cole. Mr. Brennan, you've been called everything from a hero to a vigilante to someone exploiting these boys for attention. What would you say to people who question your motives? Cole looked at the 6 boys beside him. These children who'd survived hell and were now voluntarily facing public scrutiny to protect others. I'd say my motives don't matter. What matters is whether these boys are telling the truth. And I believe they are, not because I want to believe it, but because their stories are too consistent, too detailed, too painful to be fabrications. Children don't invent the kind of trauma they've described. They live it. What do you hope comes from this investigation? Justice. Not just for these 6, but for every child who's passed through Hartfield. And accountability. Making sure that facilities like Hartfield can't hide abuse behind paperwork and reputation anymore. As the interview concluded, Jenny addressed the camera directly. The investigation into Hartfield Group Home continues. Raymond Dalton maintains his innocence and has filed motions to dismiss all allegations. We'll continue following this story as it develops. For now, 6 brothers wait to learn if their courage in coming forward will result in the justice they deserve. The cameras stopped. The boys sat quietly, processing what they'd just done. Ethan's hands were shaking. Marcus looked exhausted. Noah had pressed himself against Cole's side during the last portion, seeking comfort. You did great, Jenny said softly. All of you. That was one of the most powerful interviews I've ever conducted. Cole's phone began buzzing immediately. Reeves, news outlets, social media notifications exploding. The interview was trending nationally within minutes. But he ignored all of it, focusing on the boys who just laid their trauma bare for the world to see. How do you feel? He asked them. Scared, Liam admitted, but also free. Like we finally said everything we've been holding inside. Dalton's going to be furious, Ethan added. He'll come after us harder now. Let him come, Cole said firmly. You told the truth. That's all anyone can ask. Over the next 72 hours, the response was seismic. Public opinion swung dramatically. Dalton's polished denials looked hollow against the boys' raw testimony. 2 more families came forward with similar stories. A former Hartfield employee contacted investigators with documentation of unreported incidents. Nebraska's governor ordered an emergency review of all group homes in the state. Hartfield was immediately shut down pending investigation. All children relocated to other facilities with mandatory oversight. And Raymond Dalton, facing mounting evidence and public pressure, finally cracked. His lawyer released a statement announcing Dalton would cooperate fully with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. The man who terrorized children for 17 years was finally admitting guilt. Reeves called with the news, his voice mixing relief and vindication. The protective order's been extended indefinitely. Emergency placement approved, permanently pending adoption proceedings. Cole, you did it. Those boys are safe. But Cole barely heard him. He was watching the 6 brothers in the living room, Noah drawing, Owen and Caleb playing cards, Liam reading, Marcus and Ethan talking quietly. Just kids, finally able to be kids without fear hanging over them. 2 weeks later, formal adoption papers were filed. The process would take months, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. 6 brothers, who'd survived abuse, escape, homelessness, and public scrutiny, had finally found permanence. On a cold December morning, they stood together in Judge Morrison's chambers. She looked at each boy individually, then at Cole. "Mr. Brennan, do you understand the commitment you're making? 6 children, all with significant trauma histories, all requiring extensive support and care." "I understand, Your Honor." "And boys, do you understand that this adoption, once finalized, makes you legally and permanently Mr. Brennan's children? That this is forever?" 6 voices, simultaneous and certain. "Yes, Your Honor," Morrison smiled. "Then I see no reason to delay. In 6 months, assuming all requirements are met, you'll officially become the Brennan family. Until then, emergency placement remains in effect. Take care of each other." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but Cole didn't stop. He loaded the boys into his truck and drove back to Rockridge, to the warehouse that had become home. That night they celebrated. Nothing fancy, just pizza and the cake Dolores had insisted on baking. The boys were loud, laughing, fighting over the last slice of pepperoni with the casual ease of siblings who knew they were safe. Cole watched them and felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Peace. Not the empty peace of isolation, but the full, complicated peace of connection. Noah appeared at his side, the stuffed rabbit finally retired to a shelf but still visible. "Cole, can I ask you something?" "Always. When we're officially adopted, when we're really your sons, can we still call you Cole? Or do we have to call you Dad?" The question stopped Cole's heart. Dad, a title he'd never expected to earn, never thought he deserved after Chicago. "You can call me whatever feels right," he said carefully. "Cole, Dad, or nothing at all. What matters isn't the name, it's that we're family." Noah considered this with his characteristic seriousness. "I think I want to call you Dad, is that okay?" "Yeah," Cole managed, his throat tight. "Yeah, that's okay." "Good." Noah smiled and returned to his brothers, leaving Cole standing alone with tears he didn't bother hiding. Ethan noticed, approaching quietly. "You all right?" "Yeah, just processing." "We all are." Ethan looked at his brothers, then at Cole. "You know what you did, right? You didn't just save 6 kids from a bad situation. You gave us back our childhood, our future, our family. That's not nothing." "You saved yourselves," Cole corrected. "I just provided a safe place to land. You provided more than that. You provided home." Ethan held out his hand, formal and serious. "Thank you." "For everything." Cole shook the offered hand, then pulled the boy into a hug. Ethan stiffened for just a moment before relaxing, accepting the comfort he'd been too strong to ask for. One by one, the other boys joined, Marcus, Liam, Owen, Caleb, and Noah piling on until Cole was surrounded by his accidental, impossible, perfect family. They stood like that for a long time. A tangle of arms and laughter and love that had been built from necessity, but had become something infinitely more precious. Outside, Wyoming winter settled in hard and cold. Inside, warmth radiated from more than just the heating system. It came from 6 boys who'd learned to hope again. And one man who'd learned that running from responsibility wasn't safety. It was just another form of isolation, family. Wasn't about blood or legal documents or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up, about staying, about fighting for each other when the world said it wasn't worth the effort. And in a converted warehouse in Rockridge, Wyoming, 7 people who'd all been broken in different ways had found each other and built something unbreakable. They'd found home, finally, permanently, irrevocably home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.